welcome back to But Why Love the Podcast, and we've talked about Overwatch, we've talked about WoW, but now we're going to talk about Blizzard. As always, I'm Kate, I'm here with Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
And Matt.
Hello.
And I'm obviously not the best person for this job, but Adrian is, so he'll be leading our episode today.
Yeah, so Blizzard turned 30 years old this month, so that's why we are talking about them. At the time of this release, I think in a couple of days, Blizzard Online will be happening because Blizzard isn't doing BlizzCon this year, and we don't even know if they're doing it in 2022 either. So Blizzard Online, they've come up with a lot of really great games. I thought it'd be cool to talk about kind of all the things that they've done and how much their games have like really pushed gaming in general. They've done a lot of bad stuff. Gonna preface that right now that we're gonna talk about the bad stuff. Don't worry. I promise we will. But for me personally, Blizzard has been a part of my life for a very, 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 very long time. So still important, still matters, but there are not without sin in terms of the things that they've done, especially in the last couple of years. So we'll definitely talk about that. But before that, intro question today: Blizzard's come out with a lot of games. How many of those games have you played? And do you have a favorite? And we'll start with Matt.
As far as games played for me, I've actually played quite a few of them, and it honestly kind of defines not weird part, but like different sections of what I played. So obviously in the 90s, I played Starcraft every day for like 4 hours. It was great. I love Starcraft 1, probably still will always hold a special place in my heart as probably one of the my favorite games ever. And then obviously I played WoW right for a few years right after it came out, and then I've kind of dabbled back and forth. Obviously played Diablo quite a bit growing up. Obviously played 1 and 2 for Diablo. I never got around to 3 because it was weird, and then by the time it looked interesting, I'd already moved on to stuff. As far as technically I played Overwatch, but I just don't care for it at all.
You put a lot of hours into it for not caring.
I don't
though.
Honestly, I probably don't have that many hours as you think I do into Overwatch, to be honest. I have probably way more, and then as far as like right nowadays, like I watch Hearthstone, I follow Hearthstone everything. I probably don't play Hearthstone as much as I consume Hearthstone.
I have a question.
But
Does
what?
Hearthstone and Hearthstone Battlegrounds count as two different games?
No, they do not.
I have them as different games because they are two different like style of games.
Well,
So
technically, they are one game with different game modes.
yeah, I mean like one's
That's
an
complicated.
auto battler, one's a card game. So I count them as different games.
Well,
personally.
because the way Hearthstone, at least from my understanding, the way the layout done, they count arena, they count what's it called,
Yeah.
arena, battlegrounds, and then regular constructed Hearthstone, all as like 3 different game, and duels, the new one,
Yeah.
all as within the Hearthstone game, but they're all different game modes.
You all didn't know, Matt has a PhD in Hearthstone.
Yeah, because like Teamfight Tactic, it's built directly into like the launcher and all that good stuff. So
Like I said, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm
yeah.
just telling you how they classify it from
Yeah,
what
for
they've
sure.
said.
Yeah.
But yes, that's probably what I do is I consume as much Hearthstone as possible, despite probably not playing as much. But I could probably tell you a lot of stuff.
So is Hearthstone your favorite, or is it just the one that you spent the most time in the last like 7
Well, that's
years?
what I'm saying.
of me
Like,
knowing
if as far as games played, I still probably think StarCraft 1 probably one of my favorite. But obviously, that could be nostalgia, and probably then like WoW. But then again, like as I said, like I don't really play any of them, and I just watch Hearthstone. I will fall asleep to Battlegrounds every night, or Constructed, and whatnot else. So like I probably consume at least 10 hours of Hearthstone a day, almost, or getting close to.
a lot of hours of Hearthstone.
Maybe not quite 10, but depending on the day.
It's
But like,
literally the
for-
first thing he puts on when he wakes up. He goes onto Twitch and he watches his Hearthstone streamers.
Well, what sucks is now that some of them keep getting moved to actual working for Blizzard, they don't stream anymore. Because I had a routine where I had my European players that I got up and watched. It would transition to the daytime players, usually North America, and then the late night, which were usually kind of in the West Coast and whatnot, players.
So I'm gonna go into mine. I watch a lot of Hearthstone because I have to. I also fall asleep to Hearthstone, but it's because I'm reading manga while it's on the TV. I do like Hearthstone though. I still don't really understand auto battlers in general. But I did really like playing Hearthstone, like just like the regular base game. And then I love Overwatch. I still really love Overwatch despite not playing it, and that's just because like I don't want to play it by myself. Just because I need to get into games with people and it's hard to coordinate and I have no time, but I love Overwatch more than I ever thought that I would. I didn't think that I would like it, but I really do. It's something about that hero FPS play that I just really enjoy. I've played WoW. Eh. Like back in the day I played vanilla and then I didn't play enough to even know that like be any I wasn't the top warlock on the server like Matt. I was just there and my cousin's family played all as a family together. Um I think I've played like a little bit of Diablo, but I think my favorite, if I had to say something that I'm actually attached to, it's Overwatch. Like I'm actually attached to the characters in Overwatch, and I really enjoy it. And I still look at like Overwatch League stuff. Not like I don't follow it super closely, but it is something that I really like. So if I were to pick one, it was that. And I didn't suck at it, which was good because I sucked at WoW and I sucked at Hearthstone. I just liked them kind of, but I didn't suck at Overwatch. So that's a win in my book.
Yeah. Blizzard, if you're listening to this, Kate is literally the reason why you should have pet battles as a mobile option.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Hell yeah. No. So that is I love Final Fantasy with all my heart and I love it 10 times more than I love WoW. But the pet battles. Oh my, I'm pretty sure that I leveled my character in WoW just by pet battling and I just did whatever I could to find more pets.
So one, you can pet battle.
It's
or
not
minion
the
battle
same.
in-
It's not the same. It's not Pokemon in an MMO because that's what I get with Blizzard. We would be running to your next quest in WoW and I would get off my mount and pet battle. So no, it's not the same. Don't even pretend that I get Pokemon in Final Fantasy because I don't.
But we are going to get Pokemon in Final Fantasy running around on our wonderful islands.
That's not Pokemon. That's Animal Crossing in Final Fantasy.
We don't even care.
yeah, and then for me, I played a little bit of just about like all of like the major titles. So, played Warcraft back in the day, like the RTS version. Warcraft, Diablo, Starcraft for a little bit. I played Starcraft like once, and I got like rolled over and over and over and over again, and I just realized, well, maybe this game just isn't for me. 'Cause I just kept getting rolled in it. Definitely played Diablo. Played more Diablo 2 more than anything, just because that's what was available. Obviously, didn't play StarCraft 2 because I wasn't good at StarCraft 1, so I was like, I'm not going to be good at this one either. Uh, Diablo 3, I played it at BlizzCon, but that's like really kind of it for Diablo 3. And then Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch are also games I have quite a bit of time in, but World of Warcraft is still like my pride and joy because that's where I got into like heavily playing MMOs and kind of been a big part of my life there. But I love most, if not all, of like the games that they have released. Overwatch 2 is going to be super fun. Got to play test that a little bit. Diablo 4 looks amazing, if anything, just for Lilith being a giant demon red
That's
lady.
all I know. All I know is that I love Lilith. That's all I know about the Diablo franchise.
So, StarCraft 2, obviously as an avid player of StarCraft 1, played a lot of stuff, lost friends, made friends over playing StarCraft 1. Waited the 10 years pretty much for StarCraft 2.
While it was in beta for years.
Yeah, waited like 10 years for StarCraft 2. I went to the actual bought it on midnight of the release, only for my, at this time now, laptop, because I had already gone to damn college pretty much, to not be able to play the game.
That
And
is
so-
depressing.
And I could run it, but I couldn't play like at all. And so essentially I just never got into it and played it because I never had a PC that was able to run it.
I would like
But I own it somewhere.
I would like to state on the record that I don't know why, but I personally appreciate Matt's heartbreaking stories that he has for nearly every topic that we bring up. Also, I forgot Heroes of the Storm was a thing.
Yeah,
was terrible.
most people do. Most
It
people
was
do.
terrible.
It's Hero Storms is really only fun like if you're like really deep into like Blizzard characters and like
It was
care
terrible.
about that kind of stuff. I like playing it, but it's just not as fun as like mechanically
the
not
other
as
ones?
fun as like League. Like I'll play Heroes of the Storm over like New Smite, I think, but
Well, okay, my new Smite, I guess, but like at the time before Hero Storm
I
died,
miss
like when you play old
Smite.
Smite, not even close. No, Heroes of Storm, that's one I tried. But the game moves too slow. It is just so slow and so boring to watch.
So before we get into like the actual meat of this conversation, I do want to state that the most intense esports battle I have ever seen was watching two people play Starcraft against each other at DreamHack. The intensity on those guys' faces. Oh my god. Also, I have never seen fingers move so fast on a keyboard. It is insane, and I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, it's like a
Macro,
ridiculous.
macro,
Yeah,
macro.
yeah, just
Nope.
ridiculous micro and macro movements and like more brain decisions that can happen in a minute than I have
I was like, as
capacity
somebody who
for.
clicks the moves on their power bar when they are in a dungeon, I cannot even comprehend
Yeah.
how
No,
those
it was
guys were playing.
like how fast you have to fly across the screen and do stuff with like just knowing how to operate a mini map made so much difference. Whether do you scroll or do you click? It was in way StarCraft runs. Obviously,
Or
like I
the
said I've been out, but
class. If anything has to do with operating any sort of map, I will suck at it.
well, no, it was literally because what a lot of what newer players would do for the most part, especially like obviously this is like 20 years ago at this point, is essentially you would just use like your mouse or something. You would just scroll across the map to see where everything's at. But actually, that was bad. You need to click exactly where you need to go at all times because scrolling wasted half a second, and then it wasted another half a second, and then by that time you wasted 2 minutes.
I'm good playing Warcraft 3 and being the orcs. I'm good. I'm good.
We used to play when we played StarCraft. We'd play it with timers. You play it with timers, and you had to have this going by this timer, or you were gonna fail. You had to have this done by this time. You need to do this by this time, and they
Yo,
would ping.
that's just too intense for me.
Yeah, I just want to click on my peons and make them say stuff. I'm good.
This is
But yeah, we'll definitely talk about StarCraft and its kind of like impact, largely like on the esports community because StarCraft really does a lot for that. Just like as Kate mentioned with DreamHack, so we'll definitely get into that. But we'll start with some quick company history and kind of like how they got founded and things like that, and then we will jump into our but why those. So Blizzard Entertainment is an American video game developer and publisher based out of Irvine, California. And the overarching like Blizzard Entertainment is a subsidiary of Activision Blizzard. We'll talk about that later. That was founded on February 8th, 1991, under the name Silicon and Synapses Incorporate by three graduates of UCLA. And the name Silicon and Synapses was a high concept from the three founders, with Silicon representing the building blocks of a computer, while Synapses, the building block of the brain.
I just realized I'm gonna be 30 this year.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, hey, like you're
It's
Blizzard
8
years
years old,
old.
yes.
Yeah, so during the first 2 years, the company focused on creating game ports for other studios. Ports included titles such as J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings Volume 1 and Battle Chess 2, Chinese Chess. I don't know what that game is, but that's a mouthful of a name. In 1993, the company developed such games as Rock and Roll Racing and The Lost Vikings. That's kind of a fun game, to be honest. Like they have it every year, like in the arcade area of BlizzCon, and it's kind of fun. It's probably like their biggest game in those early years. Shortly after, Blizzard Entertainment shipped their breakthrough hit Warcraft: Orcs and Humans, a real-time strategy or RTS game in a high fantasy setting, and everything kind of just snowballs from that part there. But while everything's kind of going on, they're having like a lot of we've talked before about like how companies change hands and things like that, and Blizzard has changed hands a lot over the last 30 years. So they basically got sold to Davidson, then they went to CUC International in 96, which then merged with HFS Corporation to form Syndant in 97, which after accounting fraud led it to be sold to Havas in 98, which then formed the Vivendi the same year, and then 10 years later would merge with Activision in 2008, where they are currently at. So got
And they've been downhill since because Activision's terrible. I'm sorry, I hate
Activision
Activision.
is terrible.
I
Yes.
was I was just gonna say, and I thought the the company history behind who made Hitman was convoluted. This is
Yeah, merge, sold, fraud, sold, bought. But despite all that kind of ownership craziness, Blizzard did pump out a lot of really great games. In total, they developed 19 games since 1991, the majority of being in the Warcraft, Diablo, and Starcraft series. Since the release of Orcs and Humans in 1994, Diablo 1997, and Starcraft 1998, the focus has been almost exclusively on these three franchises, with Overwatch in 2016 as mainly the sole exception. Additionally, Blizzard has released two spin offs to the main franchise with Hearthstone in 2014 and Here's the Storm in 2015.
So I do have to think because we have 19 games. So what all is this considered? Are these like actual individual games versus DLCs? Because I know that's the one thing when it comes to Blizzard that's always been interesting of what do we count as like technically a new game, which we even mentioned with Hearthstone, versus what do we count as just like an add-on? Because like StarCraft, has like 4 expansions. It's
Yeah.
only
So
technically
this
2
is
games.
yeah, so like this doesn't count like Brood War isn't like a new game, right? Like
Right.
that's just the expansions that are in there. So this is like literally like I can run through the list real quick. RPM Racing, The Lost Vikings, Rock and Roll Racing, The Death and Return of Superman, Blackthorn, Warcraft,
Hold on,
Justice League.
wait, what?
Yeah, yeah. This is an early fun fact, but Blizzard they did a Death of Superman, the Death and Return of Superman for the NES, and then also Justice League Task Force for the NES in
So,
94, 95.
so they've made a Lord of the Rings game and 2 DC games.
Yeah, they ported the Lord of the Rings one, but they definitely did publish the Superman and Justice League games. And
Okay.
then you have Diablo, Warcraft 2, Lost Vikings 2, StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, Diablo 3, Hearthstone, Here's the Storm, Overwatch, Diablo Immortal, which I don't even know if you should count, but whatever.
We ain't
Uh,
counting that shit.
Overwatch 2, and then Diablo 4 are all the games. And then of course they have like I think was this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ports, including micro league basketball or baseball.
The funniest thing out of all this is the fact that everybody actually forgets that Warcraft actually existed, and they only know World of Warcraft.
I don't forget that it existed. I actually was cleaning out
I
my closet the other day and I had like my Warcraft 3 like box set thing. So I will remind anybody who doesn't know that
Yeah.
Warcraft is the reason why it's called World of Warcraft, because it is the world of the game Warcraft.
I had no idea until years after I knew what World of Warcraft was that Warcraft was a thing. Um So I
Yeah.
was one of those people. Obviously not one of those people now, but I was, in fact, one of those people.
Yeah, so 3 really,
They're pretty
really
good games. I
yeah,
like them.
they're
Just
good
like I said,
RTS
just
games.
WoW just blew up way bigger than anything they ever were. So
For sure.
as time went on, people just forgot what they were.
Yeah, so and even in that sense too, Warcraft obviously like isn't their focus anymore, given that World of Warcraft come out. So as like is true with most studios, Blizzard has multiple teams and departments that kind of oversee these franchises. So basically they've broken down into five or so teams. So team 1 does StarCraft, Here of the Storm, and then bulks together the StarCraft and then the Warcraft remasters, because those just came out recently. Team 2 does WoW, World of Warcraft. Team 3 does Diablo, Team 4 does Overwatch, and then Team 5 does other smaller projects, but primarily now Hearthstone, since that was one of the smaller projects that kind of took off in a big way. Blizzard also has a lot of stuff outside of like their main games. I'm not going to talk about like the failed card game from like 2008 or things like that. I'm just going to talk about like the big stuff. But the movie Warcraft in 2016 made $430 million on a $160 million budget. 6.8 on IMDb, 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, 85% on Google. We talked about Lara Croft Tomb Raider last week, but without adjusting for inflation, Warcraft is the highest grossing video game movie ever. Don't know where it's at adjusted because Box Office Mojo is terrible, and I literally spent like 10 minutes trying to figure out what the adjusted inflation was for that list, and it's just too hard to find, too lazy.
So I was gonna say, I think since we last recorded anything on a Blizzard property, or Warcraft, WoW related, I have seen the movie now, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's actually a pretty fun movie.
I think it's a pretty fun movie too.
I know absolutely nothing about the lore, but I was with it. That orc lady was dope. Like
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I was like, you know what? The CG, the makeup, the costumes, this is really cool. So yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, so like for Warcraft fans, like we loved it. We were excited. We were ready for more, but it just falls under like that same gripe of like a video game movie where you don't know if you're gonna get another one, and unless you do well in the U.S., you're probably not gonna get another one because they made like four.
Unless you're Resident Evil.
True, yeah.
Because then you can suck in the US and get 10.
So basically, if you haven't seen Warcraft, go give it a shot. It's a pretty good fantasy movie, lots of cool action, and there's orcs who punch stuff, and they ride griffins and stuff. The humans are the worst part of the movie, which, if in a fantasy movie, I think that's
The
kind of what
humans
you
are
want.
the worst part of like every movie where there aren't humans. Or
Yeah,
where like
so-
humans don't have to be the focus.
Exactly. I don't know. I haven't looked for a while because I'm also like scarred because I remember back in like what was BlizzCon 2008 or 2009. They're like, we're gonna do a movie, and then it took them almost 10 years to give me the movie. So I look at nothing regarding whether or not they're gonna give us another movie because I don't believe it until I'm in the seat in the theater watching it. Which at this point in life seems like a weirdly weird thing to say because I haven't been to a movie theater in a year.
All I remember is Paladin Man, who was the worst part of the movie, was also the hottest part of the movie. It was great. And I was like, ooh, I like your armor as a paladin.
Was that Anduin?
No, this is like before all of those.
Okay, that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good. Yeah, don't worry. It's kind of hard to like figure out who's who and things like that.
I
Because
just
it's basically generic white guy.
Yeah, pretty much. Generic white guy in generic paladin armor, but it looked cool. And I was like, oh, as someone who plays paladin, this is dope.
Anduin is cool though.
Anduin is cool.
I
But
only
Anduin's
know
Yeah, I
technically
was-
a priest. He's just a
Is he?
priest
Oh, I
with armor.
guess. Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
my
he's
bad.
a priest,
Okay.
but he's
He's
more
he's a
paladin-y
priest.
now.
He's a priest in a paladin armor.
I
My
only
bad.
know who Anduin is. So I will say, I only know who characters are in World of Warcraft because of Hearthstone.
That's fair. I mean,
Like that's like the only reason.
yeah.
The funny thing is, like, which we guess we get to, it's kind of like how people learned that there was a Warcraft game. Is when people learned, I think, when Warcraft came, like some reason it came out, like I think like a year or so ago. People all of a sudden realized, oh, I think WoW like released an expansion or something like that, and it finally dawned on people that Hearthstone was just using all the WoW characters.
Yeah, that's literally
And they're
what
like,
it
wait
is.
a minute,
And by
Wow,
and by
they were
people,
like-
he means Kate.
not just you. Well, yes, that was also true, but also like people were like, "What are you talking about? WoW's just copying Hearthstone," and people were like,
I
"Do
think
not
it was
know
that.
where the game
I
came."
think it was way back with the Lynch King stuff, if I remember correctly.
They might have been the Lich King stuff, which was probably about 3 years ago then
Yeah.
from here.
Because that's when I realized it. It was.
But
the
it was just
Lich
great.
King.
People were like, "What? What? WoW
That card
copies
is
Hearthstone."
so broken.
And also, the Lich King just looks like a Nazgul writer. So.
I
don't. know
she
about
said that. She said that World of Warcraft Twitter. I did not.
I don't care.
think-
I got a mute button. Come at me.
yeah, come at her, and I'll join in by saying Lich King's trash. Sorry, not sorry.
Wow,
Okay.
you are all disgraces.
All right, we're moving on because he's trash. He's trash. He's literally Ice Hitler in my eyes. So we're moving on. BlizzCon is their annual convention that happens every year in Anaheim, California. The first one was in 2005 to about 4,000 people, and now they're at about 40,000 plus. They haven't released their numbers for 2019. Is that when life wasn't crazy? Yeah, 2019. But that year they had like 4 of the halls in the convention center, so I'm pretty sure they're probably over 45,000 people there. We know it's not happening at least until 2022 at the earliest, but they are doing online things like BlizzCon online, BlizzCon online, BlizzCon. That's how they spell it. They spell it just BlizzCon with online in the con. So like, just come on, just looks fine. Like when you read
Just
it, but
put virtual at the front of your thing. Be
Yeah,
like the
just virtual
Crunchyroll
BlizzCon.
Expo.
just
Virtual
easy.
virtual Crunchyroll Expo. Virtual BlizzCon. That's it.
But that wouldn't be
Or
marketing if
like
we did that.
SDCC. Do BlizzCon at home.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's it.
Once again, that would not be marketing. It's just
BlizzCon
boring.
line. BlizzCon
If you
line
can
sounds
pronounce
like
it
the dumbest
easily,
thing ever.
it's not marketing.
If
Anyway,
your customers are not confused, you're not doing marketing right.
that's also true. And I will be there watching the stuff as if, I'm there. I'll go grab like I don't know. I'll go put on a Murloc costume or something. Like feel like I'm there. The convention is only a 2-day convention, which is, I guess, not like typical of like some of the bigger conventions. So they really have stuck to that 2-day model where they do Friday and Saturday. But every year it ends with a concert. So they've had people like Offspring, Video Games Live, Ozzy Osbourne, Tenacious D, Foo Fighters, Blink 182, Metallica, Linkin Park, Weird Al, Muse, Train, uh, DJ Hodor. That's I know it's not his name, but so people know, like, yeah, DJ Hodor did a thing, and then Fitz and the Tantrums. I personally saw Ozzy Osbourne, Tenacious D, and then um, they're just not as good. But
They
I
had
guess Fitz and the Tantrums were
Fitz.
fine.
I love Fits and the Tantrums. I'm still mad we only saw them at ACL because I feel like they would be like dope to watch in a small venue because everybody would lose their shit. But
Yeah, I would. I mean, I would personally say like the concerts have kind of dropped off over the last couple of years. I think just with the amount of people. So, when I was there in 2019, they just basically split it into 3 different stages, kind of like a music concert. Like, if you wanted to go watch Train, then you'd go watch Train. If you wanted to go watch DJ Hodor, then you go watch DJ
it's
Hodor.
also interesting that they had
Yeah,
Train, as I don't think of gamers and Train like all
yeah.
these other ones. Totally
Everybody
trash.
loves Train.
Like, did they just say, and now here's Meet Virginia? Like,
Everybody loves Train.
Yeah, I mean, they're fun concerts. To be honest, I mean, seeing Ozzy Osbourne in person was pretty cool. He kept telling me that he couldn't see my hands, even though I was like, Ozzy Osbourne, my hands are up. He's like, yeah, I can't see your fucking hands. I was like, my hands are here, Ozzy Osbourne. There's like 40,000 of us. Like, Jesus. But he was really
Did
fun.
he eat a bat?
He didn't eat a bat. I thought he was going to, but he didn't. Tenacious D was okay, but they were like clearly lip syncing, and it kind of sucked, and it kind of made me a little bit
I
sad.
feel like
Can they even
Tenacious-
sing anymore?
Well,
They're like
that's what I was gonna say. Like, I feel like Tenacious D is one of those bands that works not live.
Yeah, that did not work live for me, and that was like in 2009, I think. But and they also used to do comedy things. So like Patton Oswalt did a comedy thing there, and they've had some other comedians too. So bring back the comedians. I think the comedians are a good time because you don't have to like really be focused for that. You can kind of just walk around the convention and just listen to something like
This is
Patton
a pretty
Oswalt
solid
or
lineup though. Like, these are some pretty big
Yeah.
bands and pretty dope. Also,
Yes.
want to know if all of them play Blizzard games.
I mean,
I
if you
doubt Ozzy
kind of,
does, but
I mean, Ozzy Osbourne did do the commercial where he was an undead warlock back in the day. I don't know if you remember the World of
remember that
Warcraft
one. That was
commercials, but
great.
World of Warcraft usually had commercials where they get like the celebrities, like
that's
Wee
cool.
Man did one, Ozzy Osbourne did one, Mr. T did one, where like they were legitimately playing. And if you go look in like celebrity lists, there's like a lot of celebrities who played World of Warcraft, especially in those early days. So I wouldn't put it past Ozzy for rocking out as a undead something or other.
Dope, dope, dope.
Some things outside of BlizzCon, you can do headquarters tours. I don't know how much you can do it now, but they used to do them once a month in Irvine. If you didn't know a Blizzard staff member, if you know a Blizzard staff member, then you kind of just go walk around and kind of see all the cool statues in their library and like all that cool stuff. There is a amusement park called Wonder Joyland in China that is inspired by WoW and Starcraft, but is not officially endorsed by Activision Blizzard. And you can go to that if you'd like.
Sure.
I personally think and this is just based off like Overwatch and playing in like the amusement park like map.
That's what I was gonna ask.
I'd be down.
I would too.
For a Blizzard park.
I would too.
Because you could just section it off like perfectly. It would literally just be like a different section park where you want to go do StarCraft stuff, then go shoot protons.
If it meant that I could take a
stuff.
picture in a diva mech, I'd be happy.
That'd be actually really cool.
That's all I want. I care about nothing else.
Yeah, so if you care about, an amusement park, you can go to Wonder Joyland if you'd like. And there's obviously no musicals since this is a company, but they have been featured in Video Games Live to use in their music, so I think that kind of counts because it is a musical performance using their music, which is really, really good. I really do enjoy World of Warcraft music specifically.
I really think the Overwatch score slaps. I really like the Overwatch music, like, a lot.
Yeah. Blizzard might do a lot of stuff, but they don't skimp on the music, I don't think.
Yeah.
So if there aren't any other questions or anything like that on the company history, we'll get into some but why those. Usually we talk about how successful the company is or how successful XYZ thing is. we're gonna flip the script here, and we're gonna start straight about the controversies first. Like, get everything out on the table on why we understand that they do some shady stuff and have done and continue to do shady stuff, and just
Like
can't.
we're following the Stewie Griffin model of business.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah, we're gonna.
apparently Blizzard's was just sold fraud merge sold more fraud.
Yeah. And now we're going to do, a bad news sandwich where we're just going to switch all the bad news in the middle, and then we're going to talk about our love for the games at the end. But we are going to talk about it. And there's actually quite a lot to talk about. So more or less in kind of like chronological order, you have the Starcraft. And feel free to stop me, whatever, and we can talk more deeply about whichever ones you want to talk about. But the Starcraft privacy lawsuit in 1998, Blizzard was sued for unlawful business practices for the action of collecting data from a user's computer without their permission.
The funny thing is, back then we cared about this. Now we just don't care anymore.
But also, I didn't know that okay, that's cool. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
cool, but like it's interesting that like it didn't take social media companies to do this practice.
Yeah. No, it did not. Like I said, we just don't care anymore that it's a social media company doing it.
Then you have Freecraft. So on June 20th, 2003, Blizzard issued a cease and desist letter to the developers of an open source clone of the Warcraft engine called Freecraft, claiming trademark infringement. This hobby project had the same gameplay and characters as Warcraft 2, but came with different graphics and music.
Did they hire them, or did
that's
they
a good
just
question.
say
I
cease and
didn't.
desist?
Yeah, I didn't look that up because I know that we've talked about that before, where like they'll bring them on. I don't know if they brought them in, but it's not the first time that they have shut down a private server. But before that, you do have an infringement suit. So in August of 2007, Beijing University founder Electronics sued Blizzard for copyright infringement, claiming 100 million yuan in damages. The lawsuit alleged the Chinese edition of World of Warcraft reproduced a number of Chinese typefaces made by founder Electronics without permission. In 2008, we have the WoW private server basically cease and desist. So Blizzard did issue a cease and desist letter to the administrators of a high population World of Warcraft private server. And basically, they use the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to influence many private servers to fully shut down and cease and desist. I actually used to play in that server because this was post expansion, so it was really the only way that you can go back and play the original
So
games.
what they did is they cease and desist all these people, and then they said, "Hey, guess what, guys? We're making WoW Classic."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
But no, this
actually
was the way you
kinda
could play.
sucks.
This is how you could play vanilla WoW long before they did it,
Yeah.
and basically they shut everything down and made everybody buy it.
Yeah, and I know that like Blizzard gets like a lot of flack for this, but to be honest, like this is what companies were sending cease and desist letters even for Star Wars Galaxies like back in the day, because the only way to play Star Wars Galaxies pre like their big change was to do it through private servers, and those got shut down pretty quick as well. So it's pretty common.
So for someone,
No, it is definitely pretty.
So for someone who doesn't understand private, because like I didn't PC game literally until I have what's sitting in front of me right here, like however many years ago, like what, like are private servers just like what are they specifically?
It's basically a server that's private.
Well, thank you.
Well,
sir.
I mean, basically,
Do you remember when
it's based.
I know how you felt when I talked about biomes, Adrian. Thank you. I know now.
It's essentially just a pirated version of the game.
Okay, because like when I think of private servers, I think of like the servers that Arc would let you run for yourself. So I didn't know like what the difference is between like a private server through a console game or like what's happening here.
Yeah, from my understanding, those are different in the sense that the company works and allows those versus these are usually not allowed, obviously. Because as Adrian mentioned, it is pretty common to do. Personally, I just didn't like the WoW one because it ends up being, especially like by the time we get WoW Classic, because I know that he says, I think it starts in 2008, but they don't officially shut down that vanilla one until what, like 2015, 2016 or something like that, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, they shut them down like right before the because they had already had plans to do Classic. They just didn't know like when they were going to do it. But yeah, they
basically this
Classic
server
was released in 2019.
Well, I know the Classic was released in 2019. I'm talking about when they officially finally shut down the last remaining private server.
Yeah, it was a couple years ago, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
But it fallen off because it wasn't as good as that first one. Because I did try, but it just wasn't as
Mm,
good. But
okay.
I mean, it sucks, but also like it's kind of like their thing.
Yeah, no, like
it's a weird balance. It's
yeah.
a weird balance because it is one of those, and what bugged me, obviously, because we end up getting WoW Classic in general. But
Yeah.
it was one of those of like you're like, oh, well, these players, they're doing this, but all they were doing was playing very basic WoW. Because the thing about MMOs, as even Adrian mentioned, sadly, with some of these games, you are forced to what happened to your game. It's not like, like where you buy Skyrim and you don't add anything or update a patch, you can still play it, versus these, you are forced into whatever changes they decide to make.
And so
So if they rework all of these skill sets, all of the
yeah.
other stuff, you have no choice but to do that. And so basically doing this was the only way you could play what version that you
So
liked.
I'm assuming private servers are essentially done because you can't really mod the game in the specific way to bring it back like you can like a
Well, whether modded or just you just like playing the way you like to play.
and then I'm
it, 'cause
assuming that you also don't have to have a license to play, correct? Versus like the other games.
Yeah,
where
you didn't
do.
need a license to play. Like you just went
Okay.
on like a forum and like
Right.
downloaded the game and like kind
Oh,
of booted
okay.
into it the same way you would
Okay.
do the other things. But
Okay.
obviously, like you're not paying a 15-month subscription. Like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
at the behest of like sometimes they would just like roll back the servers and you would lose like a whole day of like playing because you're
But like I said, it sucks because, and that's what weird part where I look at it too, because of like it is like, oh, well, you're not paying $50 server, but you're also not getting what you're paying, what people pay for anyways. You don't get any new content, you don't get any new stuff for
Yeah.
the most part.
Okay. That makes sense.
And so it's kind of like a one-time purchase,
Yeah.
even though this one was free. But it's like I said, it's just one of those.
Okay.
When these types of games, all the changes you don't get to control that.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is by the second expansion at this point. So this is Wrath of the Lich King, like their biggest expansion, like of all time, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then they're shutting these things down. But again, it's their property, so I can't really fault them too
Yeah.
much. I will fault the Star Wars Galaxy's private server shutting down because the game was dead. No one was playing the game.
Okay, that
No
is
one
weird.
was
So that
playing
is
the
weird.
game.
I will say I can understand WoW doing it because they're an active property who are actively doing things. So I at least get that. And now I understand what a private server was because again, I was using like dedicated server, like that kind of stuff.
Even though all the people that were playing on these private servers were not buying the new expansions regardless, just because they didn't want to play that.
But either way, like it makes sense because you're losing money by having it open because you're something that's actively going versus a game that's dead.
Yeah. I mean, and the classic subscription is included in the like retail subscription. So I mean, you're kind of
Oh yeah,
getting
now I get it. But like I said,
yeah.
it was just basically all these people who didn't want to buy all their new stuff and like their old stuff were now forced to basically pay for new stuff and old stuff. But yes.
Yeah. So you had that. Then you have Real ID. So July of 2010, Blizzard announced that they were changing the way that their forums worked to require that users identify themselves with their real name. The reaction from the community was overwhelmingly negative, with multiple game magazines calling the change foolhardy and an epic fail. It resulted in a significant user response on Blizzard forums, including one thread on the issue reaching over 11,000 replies. This included personal details of a Blizzard employee who gave his real name to show it wasn't a big deal. Shortly after revealing his name, forum users posted personal information, including his phone number, picture, age, and home address.
Yep. Nope.
I hated this.
Yep. That's
I
why
hate it when they try to do this.
So, also something I like. This is actually really relevant to what's going on right now because right now there are current pushes in Congress that are pushing for every social media platform to have you put your real name and everything. It's a big bad idea because one, doxing, and two, sometimes you just don't need to have it, and sometimes people don't use their real name because there are people in their life that they know that can hurt them. And so like Blizzard isn't the only one who's done this, and I think that it is a totally dumb idea. And then like people like, but if people put their real name, they won't be asses online. And I'm like, you've apparently never read a Facebook thread, because that doesn't stop anybody.
Yeah, no, I do remember when this happened. I hated it, and I was like, I'm not doing this.
That poor
But I will say,
employee.
yeah, well, guess what? He wanted to probably prove a point, and it backfired. I will say it's been interesting when we talk about like what you said with other platforms, because it seems to be in the workaround is now they make people log through Facebook, because usually you have to have a real ID there. And that's kind of what's kind of been the weird thing of kind of like not killing. Well, one main thing of comment sections and kind of forums, as we see, is basically people don't want to either use Facebook or log in there, but then obviously.
And so this was just for forum communication, correct? Like, anytime you use a
Uh,
Blizzard forum, or like what were the specifics around it?
yeah, like it was like the forum
Okay.
post. Because before the forum post was just like you posting, and it was like your character,
Yeah.
like whatever character you had selected or whatever the
Yeah.
case is. So it would say like Waze Dark Cloud or whatever.
Yeah.
Like then they changed it around because they changed around how the uh BattleNet stuff worked as well. Since they were adding on more games, they
Yeah.
changed it from that. But I mean,
Okay.
they went back. They not like immediately. Obviously, it took 11,000 replies in the forum for them to do it. But they eventually did roll back, and now you don't have to like share like your real name for your real
Yeah.
ID because that's obviously a stupid idea.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Then you have Blizzard versus Valve, which, if you remember, Valve, that is Steam and all of their things
A
and things that they do.
monopoly, if you
Their
would like to
their
say.
monopoly, yeah. And we've talked about Valve before with our Half-Life episode. So shortly after Valve filed its trademark for Dota to secure the franchising rights for Dota 2, which is a another MOBA, and eventually turns into like an auto chess game. They basically file for the rights to Dota. Dota All Stars. This is kind of a little bit confusing because Dota All Stars is like the Blizzard one called Defense of the Ancients. Blizzard filed like a counter trademark later that same year. Basically, Dota All Stars was sold to Blizzard in 2011, but basically the opposition was overruled in Valve's favor, and then Blizzard filed against them again. Basically, Blizzard lost out to like to use the term Dota in their
Oh,
game,
okay.
and this will make a little bit more sense when we get into the games because basically like Valve just like modded World of Warcraft or more modded Warcraft, and then like took the name Dota, and then when they wanted to go back and use Dota again, they couldn't. But eventually, ipso facto, blah 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 blah, Blizzard ends up going from Dota just to calling their games Hero of the Storm, essentially.
Oh, okay. This makes sense
So
now.
yeah, so Dota is like basically a mode off of Warcraft where they
Yeah.
just take all like the heroes from the RTS and like put them in like a battle arena, and then Blizzard's like, oh yeah, we were gonna do that too with Starcraft, and then and Valve's like, hey, I already took the name Dota, have fun, and then they took the name Dota and they had to change their name to something
That's
else.
actually kind of funny.
Yes, funny. So now for the not fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have Blitzchung and Hong Kong. So in October 2019, video game developer Blizzard punished Blitzchung, a Hong Kong pro Hearthstone player, for voicing his support of the 2019-2020 Hong Kong protests during an official streaming event. The public response, which included a boycott and a letter from the U.S. Congress representatives, prompted Blizzard to reduce the punishment, but not eliminate it. Yeah.
And the big reason that this is an issue, aside from just the overall it's a harmless protest, is I don't remember who it was, but people, I think one of the magazines started digging into corporate filings, where the money comes from and all that stuff, and that's when everybody realized that Tencent, the Chinese video game company, owns so much in everything everywhere, and
So
it can all be traced.
I do know. Obviously, I remember this
You
happening.
saw
'cause
it
obviously I
live,
watched.
right?
I do not know because watching the Asian I guess for Grandmasters, what this was in for is at 4 o'clock in the morning, and so I
Oh.
usually don't get to watch those. I usually watch the European ones, and then obviously the North America ones. Now before then they went to YouTube, and then I don't watch it 'cause the hell with YouTube. But no, obviously they took all his money in earnings and everything, which made it worse because then they like unsuspended him, but then took his money, but then they didn't even say what rule he broke, which was bad, and so it prompted thing. The the weirdest thing to come out of this, because it was all bad, but the funny dumb thing to come out of this was all the people who yelled that they protested and deleted their what's it called?
Oh
Dang
yeah,
it.
that's right.
Battle.net?
Their battle
Battle.nets.
nets. They deleted their Battle.net accounts in protest, only for 2 weeks later to want to get their Battle.net accounts back, realizing they lost like 15 years worth of content.
Yeah. So like obviously I don't support Blizzard and its decision to do this. But also it was very funny to see the people who flooded and were like, I'm doing something, and do a performance out of it, and then be like, oh no, please give me my stuff back, Blizzard Senpai.
Yeah, and I know people were worried about BlizzCon 2019 with like mass protests and all that stuff like that. No, like it was like 15
So
people like 200 yards away from the entrance.
Yeah.
I will say it made the competition for BlizzCon for Hearthstone thing, as pretty much I believe all but one of the announcers pulled out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they definitely had to just make some impromptu people thrown in there to announce the games, and they were not that great, to be honest, considering how we get to thing. And we've also just changed the way that broadcasters too, because I believe not all of them are gone, but I know some of them never actually returned. So that's been interesting
Yeah.
to see post that of
Yeah.
like some of the
And I
people that did
mean,
leave.
and they're obviously just like another one, like Kate mentioned, China owns some of these Chinese companies own a lot of stuff. And it's also the same reason why the NBA had the same issues,
Yeah.
earlier in the year. It's just all
Yeah, because
bad
I
and
hadn't realized
bad way to
how much
manage.
I hadn't realized how much China has at stake in everything. Like I knew that it was a large portion and a large portion of the gaming population, but then when you actually looked at like holdings for different companies, you're like, oh. Also, Blizzard made it worse by their stupid apologies that weren't apologies and were just very dumb. Like all
Well,
of
that's what
their
I'm saying, 'cause
PR
they
around it was awful.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They end up
Like they made
like you
it
said,
more awful.
they reduced the punishment, quote unquote, but they didn't actually eliminate it, and they didn't ever actually specifically say what he did
Yeah.
wrong, which made it worse. Obviously, it is interesting because we go look into stuff too of like how the Overwatch League operates, where I think they don't recognize the Thailand team. I believe
Yeah.
if that's correct. And then obviously with
Taiwan.
the Taiwan, my bad. And then they have obviously with the Hearthstone, their Grand Masters. If I'm not sure exactly, but the Asian Grand Masters actually operates in their own little thing, especially when it comes to pulling into the big tournaments for like the actual like full like world tournament of Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Like basically the EU and NA, they basically have their little season. They run their stuff. They do their thing. Bam, they're done. And obviously, I think there's an Asian bracket that kind of runs like that. But for a lot of people, they can't actually be included. And they have to do like their own weird like workaround type way to how players qualify to get in.
That's awful. Thank
Yeah.
you, China and Tencent.
Thank you. China bad with that stuff, yada yada yada, but whatever, because they still laid off a bunch of people, and they shouldn't have. And I'll let Matt talk a little bit about this one.
So basically, this was the one where basically they actually announced that they had record profit for the year, and then they laid off 700 to 800 people.
Yeah.
On the same day, they actually had two press releases come out that day of "We made record profits, pop the bottles, and all of you are fired." Which has basically been the biggest argument that we've always made when it comes to like, well, you got to support the game devs and pay more money. And we're like, dude, the money doesn't go to the game devs whether I pay $60 for a game or $70 because you can still get record profits. And they've been showing that gaming companies and the gaming industry itself is growing and getting record profits. People are still not being paid and people are still being laid off. That is not a consumer problem. That is an actual people above them problem.
And then if I remember correctly, one of the bigger issues too is like because of like toxicity and like the Overwatch, like it happens in all multiplayers, but like the actual like ones that are tied to Blizzard. And I think they axed the majority of their communities teams. And it was like, okay, so you're having all of this uptick in bad stuff in your communities, and then when you make a lot of money, you decide to axe your communities. And I'm friends with a former, she's still there or not? I don't remember if she's still there, but a former like community ops person, and like when it happened, she was just like, "Oh, great. This is gonna be perfect," because they were already struggling to scale to like what was happening. Yeah. So
Yeah, for context, Activision Blizzard's like, and this is going to be a fun fact, but I guess it's not as fun of a fact. They're like valued at like $72 billion.
yes.
Yeah, don't worry. That's why when people say you got to support the game devs, it's like, dude, I'm not. Do I look like a CEO? It's not my job.
Yeah, we need the company to support the game devs, please.
Yeah. And then I guess on that, our last like bad thing, when you're talking about hiring game devs, I didn't even know this until Kate brought it up, like literally right before recording. Apparently, they can't follow the Rooney Rule, which has been around in like forever.
Established in the NFL.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
From
the
the
Rooney
Pittsburgh
Rule
Steelers.
the Rooney Rule and internally companies call this different things, so it doesn't sound as weird as just saying Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule essentially states you have to have at least one diverse candidate make it into interviews. So that doesn't mean that you have to hire the diverse candidate. It just means that when you open that door, you need to have at least one diverse candidate coming through it. And diverse candidacy is different depending on industry because it looks at specifics on how many people are employed per percentage of that population that is representing. So like vets, women, stuff like that. And essentially, this is just standard practice that the SEC asks every tech company to do and a lot of other companies to do. But in the tech landscape, it's normal. It's normal operating procedure. The largest people who are competing to pull jobs from software engineers, coders, all of this, they are also operating under the Rooney Rule. But Activision said specifically, and I quote, Activision's lawyers argued that the proposal seeks to micromanage the way in which publishers handle their hiring strategies. So Activision specifically said that it's unworkable and that it puts them at a disadvantage in a competitive landscape. It's just not true. Like I work in D&I recruiting, and literally the Rooney Rule is the bare minimum. Like it is the easiest thing to accomplish in any sector. And essentially their argument was there aren't enough diverse coders and software engineers, so we need to be competitive and not hire them. And it was just real bad, and it made me real angry. And I know that like a lot of folks, it made a lot of people angry, but I don't think people were angry from a place of understanding like just how bare minimum this was. Like they were rightfully angry, but I feel like they would be more angry if they understood that the Rooney Rule is literally the smallest thing a company can do for diversity hiring. Anyway, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, because I think the Rooney Rule was established in the NFL from the Pittsburgh Steelers, like a long, long time ago before I was born, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So I've known about it forever because it's the biggest thing in sports. And the biggest problem that they've faced with this thing is that obviously in the NFL they've done it and they've been moving. It hasn't really had too many issues. We've seen, I think there's only been a few times I could think over my entire life that where maybe they had an internal candidate they wanted to hire and they couldn't at first, but for the most part it has done well. Like Mike Tomlin is the coach of the Steelers because of this rule. But also what the main problem they've had, at least from the NFL, is they've been mad is universities will not adapt this rule. And so like when it comes to the college level of thing, I know the NFL obviously they probably do the bare minimum of doing this at this point, as we've seen, but they've tried to push colleges and universities to adapt this rule for college football hirings, and that has never happened.
Yeah, and when people were defending Activision Blizzard in this thing, they're saying, "Oh, well, you're privileging diverse candidates." It's like, no, that's not what's happening. It's just literally saying somebody can actually get to the door, and then they have to actually go through and prove that they're better than the other folks. But yeah, that happened like 2 to 3 weeks ago. It happened whenever I got into my car accident. So that was like January 17th. So around that time.
We believe we have another podcast. If you are interested to look at this, I believe another podcast on our network did an entire episode discussing all this as well. So feel free to check that out.
Also, do we get to blame Activision for how bad Blizzard's gotten? Because at least like the other controversies that you mentioned, Adrian, like they're bad, but they're not like this bad. Like they're not like
I mean, personally, I think
diversity bad.
Yeah, I think it's mainly just Activision being the bigger of like the two companies and them kind of like being beholden on like who Activision is in bed with. And this kind of like transitions a little bit into like the gaming stuff because their games are good. Like if you talk about controversies with Blizzard, none of it's coming from like the games they're putting out because their games are quality. It's just like the back office, head of company stuff that's been real bad.
Because Activision, the best thing Activision's ever done is kill franchises.
Ooh, that's smart.
World of Warcraft is still like the biggest MMO on the planet. So I don't know.
Yeah, but that was
for Blizzard.
Well, I mean, but I'm talking about, but that's also because they're the merge and kind of like the almost merged co-partner. If we look at obviously Call of Duty is still up there, but what has happened in the Call of Duty series? We can talk about what even happened with, I believe, the Destiny series, and we can talk about what happened with
because Bungie said Deuce is Activision, right? Didn't they break from them after all that stuff?
Yes, they did. Yeah, and their actual game grew like 3 times since then because they hated it.
So Activision worst, Blizzard bad by association.
And then we had obviously the Guitar Hero stuff that all blew up that franchise. There's a good portion of like the mid 2000s, like mid to early 2000s and later, especially after thing where Activision ends up just trying to kill as many franchises as they own.
Okay, so before we move into like the actual games, I do want to end the controversies on a little bit of a lighter note because I want to go on record by saying that we should have known that we were going to be terrible with coronavirus because of World of Warcraft in 2005. If you remember
Yes.
back to our episode, we talked about the corrupted blood plague incident, where basically
Amazing. Love it.
a debuff from the game got out into like the actual out of instance game, and it was killing players left and right. And the Blizzard employees basically said, just don't log into the game and don't intentionally infect people. And what did people in the game do? They ran around and infected everybody, so much so that they had to like roll back the game and shut the whole thing down. So while people were surprised that people couldn't stay inside for during a pandemic, I was like, oh yeah, this is just corrupted blood all over again, but like in real life. And even like the funny thing is that it so like closely resembled an outbreak of like real world pandemics. They actually did do research on what would happen, so we
And
knew this
who
was
knew that it
happening.
would also include people purposely giving coronavirus to other people?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, like people ran through like Ironforge, like come and get it.
come and get it. Yeah.
Oh, that's
And then,
depressing.
as
But
a more lighter transition here, one of my favorite World of Warcraft stories is actually that kid who got attacked by the moose, and all he did to get the moose to lay him alone was he played dead like his hunter does in World of Warcraft to like drop aggro. So he like just fell on the floor and dropped aggro like in real life from a moose that was attacking him.
oh,
So
that's adorable.
there's good things that happen when you come to play these games. Um, because Blizzard really has done a good job of growing into different gaming markets and being successful, or at like the very least influencing other games of that type. So,
Yeah.
starting it off with real time strategy or RTS, the Warcraft series. RTS basically starts in the 80s, but Warcraft really does switch it up um, from other games like Civilization and Command and Conquer, which I love. They're really great games, but Warcraft takes like a little bit of a different approach by improving on things like having a pretty in-depth campaign, having a little bit more balanced factions, introducing hero units, having those fantasy elements, having a little bit deeper of like the graphics designs, and then mods, of course. So much so that the storyline would go on to influence the creation of World of Warcraft, and one of the mods for Warcraft 3 again would go on to influence Valve's Defense of the Ancients, or Dota, which basically creates the whole MOBA genre
Yeah.
in that sense. Then you have StarCraft 1 in 98 and StarCraft 2 in 2010. Loosely, if you count like them still playing competitive StarCraft before the game was even released, which was like years before that, which, as Matt mentioned before. And basically, in the world of like RTS, like if someone told me like, what RTS games like are your favorite, I would probably, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but Command and Conquer, Civilization, and StarCraft are probably up there on the list. However, I think the biggest difference between StarCraft and Command and Conquer, and even Civilization, which are really great, is that the StarCraft esports scene really changes the landscape up for esports, which is really dominated by FPS sports and arcade games at this time. And we've talked about this in our esports episode, but at the time before this is really just sports, FPS, and arcade. And
Yeah.
seeing people in a large scale event really sets the tone for basically how much like people who play Dota 2 and people who play League of Legends are paid, because it started with StarCraft with those really, really big payouts. And if you've ever watched two people play StarCraft, you have no idea what's going on, but it's intense and it's fun.
I
It's
cheered
great.
because I don't know what's happening, but everybody's
Uh,
excited.
So StarCraft to me is like basically a groundbreaking game at this time because of a few reasons. Obviously, you are right with Command and Conquer, which I'd never. I know people like it. I don't know if that was like before my time of caring or whatnot. Obviously, Sib. I would throw the Anno franchise from Ubisoft because there are like 8 of those games as well that has been pretty good with real time, and they've been very successful. But two things: 1998, which we kind of talked about this even with like I believe it was the Doom episode or say, because StarCraft comes out in that 1998 version or game, which basically that year of 1998 games is freaking amazing, but also it ends up elevating PC gaming as well, because I mean, much as it is the esports theme, like PC gaming does get a nice uptick in this year, and like people start doing. I think obviously computers are getting better by this time, and it does really like just that year and stuff and everything. StarCraft ends up setting up for real-time strategy. Because like I said, I know I hear Command and Conquer and even Civ, even though Civ probably more of a turn-based than a real-time. Um, but like, it's never. I could be wrong, but I just never seen or ever heard it. I know any average person I know knows what StarCraft is. I don't know how much people actually know Command and Conquer is.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only two RTS that I can really like name. Like if somebody asked me like Kate, like what named like the top RTS, I would just say Civilization and StarCraft. Like those are just the ones that come to my brain.
Yeah,
And
for
like
sure.
even before like I even had like seen like the esports scene, like I've always known about StarCraft.
We need additional pylons. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, and I say Command and Conquer just because I know like looking if you like go look at like the history of like RTS
Right.
Oh
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
yeah.
like Command and Conquer kind of jumps off like
Well,
basic
that's why I said it might be before my time, but to me, it's kind of like. Also, I believe the franchise just kind of butters out for like a long time. If I
yeah,
remember
but
correctly.
it
Like
kind of
it
takes
never.
like the slower pace of Civilization and kind of ups it up to where you have like a little bit more fast paced thing, what kind of like
Yeah.
influences other stuff. But definitely, I mean, and if there's like other ones, like personally, I loved Age of Mythology, but I don't know anyone who else who played it. But Age of Mythology was another RTS where basically you played as gods, and it was like Smite, but in an
That's kind
RTS
of
kind of
cool.
fashion,
There's
and
a
That's
lot of
kind of
like
really
it was
generic,
cool.
great.
like
It
random
was
games
great.
like that. You get them old PC disc games that end up being like random RTS
Yeah,
games.
and that's kind of how that was. I had kind of just like booted into the BC, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" This actually might have sparked my love for mythology. Actually, now that I'm thinking
That's
about it,
kind
I'm
of cool.
having existential moments on the podcast today. So moving on from there, we have dungeon crawlers with the Diablo series. Um, dungeon crawlers have been around for like a very very long time up to this point, and so it's definitely not the first. But what Diablo 1 does is it does make extensive use of multiplayer. We've talked about this in the past that multiplayer really wasn't a big thing until the 90s. Specifically for PC games, there's really not a whole lot of multiplayer, and there's really not any really multiplayer at all for dungeon crawlers in general. But Diablo 1 does make um, does make use of that to kind of bring in that market of multiplayer to dungeon crawlers. And now I can't think of like, I mean, when we played Diablo 4 in the beta, it was really, really fun to play that with people. And I know that a lot of those games do sputter out once the player base goes down because there's not enough, as many people to play with. Diablo also kind of streamlined the gameplay where the mouse is more prominent over the keyboard. So you can do a lot of the work through the mouse and not have to worry about kind of like keybinds and stuff. So a little bit easier to play than some of the earlier dungeon crawlers there. And with every expansion, they keep expanding and expanding the world building to the point where the Diablo 4 trailer at BlizzCon 2019 got the loudest pop in the whole opening ceremony when I was there. And I think this is mainly because Lilith is just badass and scary, and I think everyone just wants her to step on them.
I don't know who
Uh,
she is, but I love her. And she is an awesome monster lady. That's all I know.
So the funny thing is, like, I didn't play as much Diablo 1, but Diablo 2, like, it's weird because there's a weird period, like, that thing where I was like, I played a lot of Diablo 2. Not so much Diablo 1, but Diablo 2. And I'm pretty sure, I have to remember, when did Diablo 3 come out again?
this
Because I'm
had
pretty
to
sure
have
it came.
in like the 2010s, right? If I remember
Yeah, because
right.
once again, it comes out right at a time where
Yeah,
I'm
2012.
basically in college, grad school type stuff, to where I just never had a chance to play any of that because it was like waiting. I remember waiting on Diablo 3, like a StarCraft 2, for like ever, and it just happens to come out like, hey, you're an adult now. You don't get to play video games, or at least you're not. Oh, my bad. You're supposed to be an adult yet, but you're poor because we like making college people poor. So you can't afford to play games or have time. So
Yeah, I mean, I remember it being like a smash hit. Like, I didn't play it personally. I kind of only played it because like my uncle had it and he bought it. And he's like a big fan of like the series, so I played it, but I just didn't have. Again, same here. Like that. What is this? November 2012. I'm my second year of college basically for me. But it was like one of like the fastest selling PC games of that year. It sold a whole bunch of stuff and things like that. So it was widely successful. And Diablo 4 looks amazing. And you get to just like smash stuff and it should be fun.
All I know is
yeah,
Homegirl
so
walked out with a skin cape, and I was like, yes, this is so cool.
yeah.
But also just because, like, in my sexy monster loving self, I think there's something interesting that happens with Lilith, and that she's she's a beautiful woman, but she still looks demonic. She still looks monstrous, which doesn't get done a lot. And I don't go here, but the character design of her just being exposed flesh in like red and weird is just really cool from a standpoint of like how we get female monsters, because we don't really get female sexy monsters that look really monstrous. And so that's something that I really appreciate. That's all I have to say on this matter.
Okay, and then from Diablo, we have the MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role playing game. Of course, World of Warcraft. We have 2 episodes on this, so we won't talk too much about it. Episode 31 and episode 64 for the full WoW love, and basically like why it's basically ruled the MMORPG space since 2004. But it still leads all MMOs, even all this time later. And as much as people are like, "Oh, I'm never playing it ever again," people always come back, and it's still has about 7 million players, which is a big decline from its peak at around 12 million, but still like far and away more than some of the other MMOs. So ESO 3 million, Black Desert 2 1.5, Final Fantasy 4 1 million. And again,
ESO has more than Final Fantasy?
I think the ability to play across more things, maybe.
Fair.
I was gonna let him finish, and I was gonna go into these numbers, but that's fine.
And I was gonna say, like, these numbers aren't like super exact because companies don't release their numbers as much as they do anymore. I think this is like the list that I found from 2018 or 2019. Because like while like WoW would always release their numbers, since they've declined, they really haven't released their numbers, and I don't know if for why that is, but the rankings are more or less accurate in terms of like.
So it's also weird when you look at these numbers because like. It also depends on what the company promote. Like ESO just did a whole thing like last month, and they're like, "We're about to hit 17 million players," and I'm like, and then you're telling me 3 million, but then same thing with like I think Final Fantasy has hit like 15 million or something like that. But it comes to like, is this concurrent subs?
Yes, is this all people? Time?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like they don't actually specify, but that's what I'm saying. If you go to like ESO's website right now, it's like 16 million and counting, and you're like, what the hell? But as far as you talking about like having most players ASO over Final Fantasy 14, one, obviously you have Xbox involved in that. Between PC and then Xbox, obviously I know that happened for PlayStation, whatever else. ESO is not a subscription base; it's a buy to play game. Even though they almost force you into subscription, but it's not. It's basically a buy to play versus a subscription based. And then obviously it's been on Game Pass for a while, so pretty much anybody can try it out and play it.
Yeah.
And now that I know Final Fantasy has now done their whole, you can get a free trial. But speaking of which, my Final Fantasy ad, you all need to go play Final Fantasy 14 because you can play to level 60 right now for free. And they condense the story down. You don't have to do any more of the dumb stuff right off the bat. You get all the way there, flip it, we're good.
Back to our Blizzard episode.
Yeah, so the numbers are a little weird, and like Matt said, it's kind of hard to say because like I know like one of Blizzard's things like we have over 100 million total registered users like or whatever like over like the course of whatever a few years ago. They obviously don't have 100 million people playing, but they do release that they've been sticking around about like 7 to 8 million players the last couple of expansions, which is. I mean, I think that's still pretty good considering the game is 17 years old and has never gone free to play and has basically always been the top and basically sparks other things like Hearthstone. So
that was.
I think it definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
Because that is interesting and cool, and obviously I don't know, but I feel like just MMOs in general they moved forward with what they've done, but also I feel like there's a lot of people. They're all the same people anymore, especially as you get older. Of like you play the new expansion for WoW, you beat the content, you dip off, you cycle back into Final Fantasy, you dip off, you cycle back into ESO. Because I mean, I think just with us, I know for us, just in the last year and a half, we've played all 3 of them, if not more. So I do think that ends up happening a lot more, especially as the player bases get older, because you can only do so much new content.
Yeah, and I think it's like a much more interesting time now too because ESO and Final Fantasy 14 have, and I guess Black Desert have been around for a long time. Like if we're thinking about like I don't hear anyone talking about Guild Wars anymore. I don't hear anyone talking about
Apparently they're still
Star
doing
Wars,
well,
the
but
Old
I just don't hear
Republic,
them.
anymore.
I still see stuff from them, and they apparently are doing, I guess, well, but I don't know what well is to them. But
Yeah, exactly.
For me,
they're still releasing content and still doing, an update.
I will say to Adrian's point, one of the things, like, because as you all are talking and I'm kind of thinking about it, like, WoW is really the only one of these things that hasn't had to, like, completely overhaul itself and has just been able to just keep wowing, whereas, like, ESO and Final Fantasy both had to rebuild themselves.
So, but how do we do this too? Because also Final Fantasy made 2 games. Because FF11 was the first one that came out right
That's
after a
fair, but we're
WoW.
only
Yeah,
talking
and
about
yeah,
wait.
but I would argue that WoW killed that one.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
yes, I'm not gonna
Well,
Just
and then-
disagree
but
with you.
that was my point.
So,
Like
and I-
these are MMOs that have like stuck around. Like
Yeah.
even with WoW doing what it's doing, like these are sticking around pretty
Yeah.
well, which I think is really impressive, just for like the whole genre in general.
All I'm saying,
The funny thing
all
is,
I'm saying is
FF11
we
is
don't
sti-
have World of Warcraft Reborn. We have World
Or
of
free to play,
Warcraft,
which I think
and-
is like the craziest thing.
And now we're just
No, absolutely.
And it did so well that now people paid to go back to what it was when it first started 17 years ago, which I think speaks to how important and like long lasting this franchise is.
So the only thing I'll say about that is basically, as much as it killed it, I don't think people realize how much group play Final Fantasy 11 forced you into, to where when they redid 14, like it is completely different.
No, that's fair.
You could
But
not level
also,
or play without being in a group in Final Fantasy 11.
as Yoshi P said at the Final Fantasy 14 thing, thank you for sticking us since the beginning. We know that was hard.
Oh no, I'm not disagreeing. They messed that up. I'm not saying that different. I'm just saying like it is interesting that Final Fantasy has made 2 MMOs since this time,
Yeah,
and they're also 2 vastly different
And
MMOs.
Blizzard
of,
only
like,
had to make one.
yeah,
I'm not disagreeing with you. Like what?
yeah. But I mean, obviously, like we have 2 episodes on it. One more about like the game itself and like why like we played it. And then the other one's more kind of about like the lore, because like the lore in that franchise is really really great. But I think more recently that it's done really really well is influence the creation of Hearthstone, which is now one of their biggest games. Now, because we
Sort of, but yes.
talked about before.
I will say one last fact though. Kate tries to come in here and attack me with this Final Fantasy. I could not get her to stay playing WoW or play WoW at all.
I'm not
until the-
attacking you with it. I said that at the top of the show. I'm just saying I recognize.
I'm just saying
where
we could have played WoW. I didn't have a problem when we
I
played
think-
WoW for a while,
okay,
but you did not want
hot
to play.
take, I think WoW is ugly, and I want to look at my pretty
Yeah.
anime characters.
I
So
didn't want to like put those words in your mouth. But I was gonna say this because Final Fantasy's prettier, Matt. Like, of
Yes.
course.
I get
Oh, I know.
to
I didn't
be
know.
in an
I wasn't
anime.
disagreeing
Like,
with why. I'm
the
just
only
telling you,
thing
like,
that WoW has,
don't come at me for Final
the
Fantasy when you won't
only
even
thing
play
that
WoW.
WoW has is pet battles.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing for World of Warcraft, like that's like a distinct like decision, right? Like they just kept the kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
Warcraft cartoony feel,
100%.
so
and it makes
they just
sense.
rocked with it.
Yeah, and it makes
Yeah.
sense, especially for something that is so long lasting. Like, it is really just a personal choice. Like, I just really
sure.
enjoy Final Fantasy because it hits at my weeb side. Like, that's
Oh,
literally all it is.
don't get me wrong, dude. Playing Baldur's Gate and it was like, yes, I'm a warlock. I'm gonna go blow stuff up. So don't worry about it. I got you. So moving on from there, we've talked about Overwatch a little bit so far. Again, we have a whole episode on this in episode 64 where we kind of talk about a lot of the specifics. But essentially, Overwatch is Blizzard's version of Team Fortress 2, which I think is hilarious given the Valve references and talking about Dota, like how they kind of like just took that. I think that's funny. Which basically adds characters in with abilities into an objective-based shooters. But the Overwatch League has really brought shooters back more or less into the FPS scene, even though they're not really competing as much or as highly with as MOBAs are, because those are just kind of going to be the thing and take until the end of time. But more importantly, I think the reason why I like playing Overwatch and why it's so fun for me is that the world building is better. I think the addition of maps that are kind of adding on is always great. Always different game modes, always different events, and of course a very diverse roster with currently 32 characters at the time of this recording, which is I think like 8 more than when we did our first episodes. Like over 100 episodes ago, they've added in a lot of characters that kind of cover a very like broad spectrum of the LGBT community, autism, body diversity, both men and women, and essentially every kind of like overarching ethnic group that you can kind of think of are present in the game. And I know they get like a lot of slack of they're not doing enough when it comes to diversity, but I really can't think of any other game other than like maybe Apex that is doing what Overwatch does, like with its characters and kind of pushing for more
Yeah.
diversity in their characters. Because even League of Legends, before this recording, I went back and looked at kind of their character release schedule. Game came out in 2009. A lot of the characters in that game specifically are like aliens or some kind of like animal thing, but the vast majority of them are like white passing characters or an Asian character. You don't get like a black character until like 4 years later for that game specifically. So
Yeah, and I do think like it is really important that like Overwatch has had some pretty big fumbles when it comes to representation. I found out that El Dorado is actually based on an Italian city and not a Mexican one, and they said that it was a Mexican one, but it was really a picture from Google Images that was an Italian city. But I think to Adrian's point, Apex, Valorant, the new hero games that are like that come out, like it is very much basing it off of of the Overwatch model. And so like as much as I do think that like there have been some like some glaring issues that Overwatch has had, they've done a really good job of in my opinion, of presenting characters in a very different light. Like the women of Overwatch are extremely diverse when it comes to ideas of what it means to be a woman. And like I don't think I can name another game before Overwatch where I got to play a Latina who is literally a freaking hacker. Like she's Angelina Jolie in Hackers. Sombra's dope. And she's not super busty and she's not super curvy and she's not sexualized. And like, that's also really important. But I do think if you call out like what lasting impact Overwatch's diversity is it laid the groundwork. Essentially, you don't know how to do it better if Overwatch doesn't do it first and do it in a way that actually impacts how things are. Because you don't have Valorants that way. You don't have Apexes that way. Because even if it stumbles, it still presents a diverse foundation for people to build off of and do. Like hell, the voice actress for Sombra actually voices, I think she voices one of the characters in Valorant as well. But yeah, anyway, I like Overwatch because that, but I also really like it because the dynamic maps and the dynamic tanks. Like I don't think that because I tried to play Paladins, I hated it, also sucked at it, hated the maps, but I like the differences in tanks and differences of play styles with tanks because I like tanking, but I don't like I don't like playing Reinhardt, but that's a very specific type of tank compared to Hamtaro. I know that's not his name, but that's his name. And Diva, which are just very different types of tanks. And I think the fact that even when you look out of diversity or out of maps, just the diversity of gameplay within each class in the Overwatch system is something that I really, really like.
Now, my biggest thing from Overwatch, as much as I don't like it or care to play it most of the time, is what they've done for esports, but only in the way of the biggest issues we've had. Obviously, they still do some messed up stuff in esports. Is basically you never know who to root for, how things go, teams come and go, teams collapse. Like I remember, I mean, we'll probably get to talking about Smite, but like have like the defending champs all of a sudden change their name mid-season, their whole team collapses, sponsor goes out. And like they're cool for what they did, but they never built anything sustainable. And so Overwatch League, obviously it's great, but I'm not saying we haven't got that with like other MOBAs, or, which we'll talk about with like League of Legends and Dota. But they gave it something to where people can actually root for a team, and they kind of baked it like in the groundwork of doing sports. Because in the day, sports are great, and people like sports and rooting because they can kind of have a connection. Like I'm from Dallas. I like Dallas teams. I'm from Miami.
No
I like Miami team.
I had no care, but I know that I can't root for the Fuel because the Outlaws show up to everything that we have in Austin.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They kind of established, and then and also in doing so, they've established the teams of like, I'm not going to see a Luminosity one year and then not see a Luminosity the next year, which you've seen in so many other esports things. And like I said, I know they've had their issues trying to grow, and it's been weird trying to figure out because they pump money into it, then they laid everybody off, but then they pump money into it, and they had growth, but then how much was it artificial growth versus actual growth, and all this other stuff. But then the day of like what they've done, be able to do that, because we're now getting that with the Call of Duty leagues as well, to where you can select a team, and you can root a team on, and you have that connection, and it allows players to then obviously, sell merch or have a rivalry or whatever else, and you get that sports type feel that ends up being of what ends up promoting, athletic types.
And I think that that's one of the things that I will say from like watching. So for a while on the site, one of our writers, Charles, he did weekly recaps of all of the Overwatch League stuff. And I remember when Shanghai Dragons won, like it was a large underdog story because this team had been around and the Dragons had sucked and then they won the championship. And that's a story that you don't get when it's like, oh wait, Spaceman Gaming, weren't you like these people beforehand? Versus like it is very much ingrained with like longer lasting teams. So I do think that's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe just like a regional thing, and we're just like ingrained to do that.
I think it's because we're
Uh,
like Texas and football and different teams.
yeah, I
And
think
No, I
so.
mean, no, I
No,
do
no,
think it is
because I
definitely
don't
it's
like.
not.
I think that's really great because like I think about like when I was like really really big into watching League of Legends professionally, and like the Cloud9 with like Sneaky and Meteos and all those. That's not even like the same team. Like all those people like are on different teams now. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to root for Cloud9 when they're not even the same people that I
yeah,
was rooting for before? At
No,
least like
like you
when
said,
it's regional, I'm like, oh well, I like
yeah,
Texas.
yes.
no, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it might just be an American type thing per se versus a global type thing, but it does allow the
Yeah,
regional people to then invest in what you're doing, and you
Yeah.
have at least some sort of, every year, regardless. And obviously, I know they have favorite players, but you do know you're getting the Dallas feel
yeah.
every year.
No
Versus, like I
joke, it
said,
taps into the tribalism that sports marketing taps into
yes,
because people want to identify with a thing. It's the same reason I haven't watched a single match of CS:GO in my entire life, but at DreamHack when we were watching Luminosity play against a European team, I was like, yes,
that
NA.
was
What?
NA, yeah.
it was not
Oh, who was it?
Luminosity. It was Team
I don't
Liquid.
know who the hell that
They're
is.
from they're from
See,
Dallas.
that shows you how much.
You were about ready to buy a Team Liquid jersey because they partnered with
Oh
Marvel.
yeah, that's right. See, that shows you how much I don't care, but I know who the Houston
But if it
Outlaws
was
and the
like,
Dallas Fuel are.
yeah, but if it was like the Dallas Liquid, you would have remembered
Exactly.
instantly.
Well, because like, well,
Right.
no, but like, because that's like the thing. Like, I know Team Liquid's huge, but like, I know somebody who works for that. I still don't care about Team Liquid, but I cared because it was an NA versus EU thing, and I was like, okay, I gotta go for this team. Which I don't know that it's cool.
It's normal. It's normal.
Also, but why they
But
gotta be Houston and Dallas? Those things are closer to each other than like the other cities. Like, why couldn't it be like Austin or San Antonio or something?
Because those two cities tower over
I don't care, but they're
Austin.
right next to each other. Make it more diverse.
What are you talking about? Austin and San Antonio are an hour away. Dallas and Houston
Well,
are
no,
about like
I'm
what,
saying
two and a
keep
half,
one
3 hours?
Dallas, get rid of Houston, or keep Houston and get rid of Dallas, and do like the other part of Texas.
We're close. What?
I don't know.
You
oh,
don't
like
know
the
geography.
Brownsville's fuel.
Yes.
Yeah, no, like that's what I'm confused. I'm like, you not know geography?
So moving on from Overwatch and the Overwatch League again, episode 64 covers a lot of our love for that. But kind of talking a little bit about MOBAs, we talked about Heroes of the Storm. Obviously, we talked about this already, but it's really not as popular as Dota or League of Legends, Smite, or other MOBAs. But Blizzard really has put a lot of work into this game to keep it kind of fresh and adding in characters as they are introduced in the Blizzard verse. Um, for most people, it's probably kind of too late in the game to kind of get into this because like so many of the characters are tied to the universe. But if you are like a fan of the overarching kind of like Blizzard characters like as a whole, definitely look into doing this. I'm pretty sure Lilith will make an appearance here in that game in some time in the future, like all the other big baddies in all the other universes have. So
So the problem I had, obviously, Hero Storm did whatever, but then we have basically what happened. I believe it was 2 years ago, where Blizzard just basically pulled all support for a lot of esports, and the first one that got cut was Heroes of the Storm. And as much as people do to play it, that hurt the actual game itself because at the end of the day, people nowadays play a lot of games to make money and compete. And when you basically scrap that for your game, especially for what it was trying to do, that does hurt in some ways.
yeah, I'm seeing more like the casual perspective.
Right.
I play a couple games every here and there because sometimes you just want to like
No, I don't
be
think
the
it's a dead
character.
game, but I do
Yeah,
know that hurt quite a bit,
yeah.
especially when it came to like the scene. Because you do, if we're talking about how it influenced and like we talk now into the world of Twitch streaming and promoting game, like that just kills people whole thing.
And it's just honestly not as fun as like as much as like League of Legends
No,
is
it's not
a
good. It's
dumpster
not good.
fire. I like the game modes, but if I'm gonna play a MOBA, I'd rather go play like something else.
I mean, Smite's been trying to say, "Hey, let's hate our game" for the last like 4 years, but they still are probably better than anything Heroes of the Storm's ever done.
From there, we do have the card game. So Hearthstone, we've talked a lot about this, launched in 2014 as a card game based on Warcraft lore and was a smash hit, reached 8 million players on PC and 9 million players on mobile. Sure, some of that has some overlap. But within the first within like the first year of it being released, and it had basically nines across the board rating wise. By November 2018, Blizzard stated that Hearthstone had reached over 100 million players, which makes sense because it quickly also became one of the most watched game channels on Twitch with a pretty robust gaming esports scene. I want to say that the most popular, like I want to say it's like probably the most popular digital card game, but I also know that things like Gwent, Slay the Spire, Shadowverse, and things like that, or things like that exists. Like Legends of Runeterra, I know exists as well. But I'm pretty comfortable in thinking that like none of these are nearly as popular as Hearthstone.
I'm gonna obviously biasly agree with you, but also just numberly bias agree with you. Anybody who ever watches Twitch, just pull up the numbers. You see,
Yeah.
despite the fact that like once again, Blizzard basically tried to kill, has basically been just killing all of their esports scene as much as they want to, and made it super confusing and bad. It is one of those like I know Gwent's cool, but I mean I don't ever see stuff. I know Slay the Spire definitely have gotten very popular, and the other ones. And like I said, I don't think they're necessarily bad games per se. I just don't think they have the popularity that Hearthstone has had in general.
I also
Yeah, and
I was gonna say, like, from somebody who doesn't play that many CCGs just because of like how complicated some of them get, like, I think Hearthstone is really, really accessible to any type of player, and you don't have to have a vast knowledge of the lore, and you don't have to have like these really insane game mechanics, which like when I tried to play Gwent, it was like that. Magic
Oh
Arena,
gosh.
like that. Elder Scrolls Blades, like that. I don't even know if Blades is still a thing. Or not Blades. What was the one that they had?
I know what you're talking about, but
I don't think that one
I just
succeeded.
like
Anyway,
I like to act like that never happened.
but all I'm trying to say is like I think that like Blizzard struck that really good balance of like it could get players that were just CCG people and not attached to WoW while still also catering to WoW because it's based on stuff from it. And then also it's just really simple mechanics. Like I
yeah.
learned it really easily and I struggle with a lot of like the with a lot of those types of things, but I really enjoyed it.
Which has been the both up and bad thing of just RNG dictates a lot of the games, and it's a kind of because I mean obviously we've known some pros that play, obviously not so much anymore just because they've killed a lot of the esports league, and I'm upset. But it is one of those listening to talk of how much it is of just like because it is an RNG dominant game, obviously depending on which expansion. Like I remember talking to somebody before, and he was just like, "Yeah, I can win 64% of my games." And I'm a pro versus the average person can win like maybe like 54 to 57%. And it's weird because you don't think of that in any of the other games. Like, not saying that you would lose an obviously thing, but there's so much RNG to where 64% is very low, especially in it just overall as a pro versus other games like as we mentioned, like League of the Legend, Dota, Smite, or even like moving upwards. We're not touching any of those people, no matter how good we think we are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like I love playing Hearthstone when we would like play a lot back in the day. But I think the thing that kind of got me away from it more so when it comes to like the base game, like the actual Hearthstone game itself.
Constructed,
Yeah,
yes.
the constructed. It's a I once you get like you start moving up the ladder and like you're doing like the ranked ladder. I would get up to like 5, and then it would be due to have all like legendary cards that
Oh yeah,
cost
no,
a whole bunch of
they.
dust and stuff. So while the RNG thing is here, if you have like just a deck worth 12,000 dust and you lose, it's RNG can only make so much excuse for that. But there is a
Oh no,
chance. There is a chance.
no,
But
no, absolutely. Which is a big thing of like what some players have complained. Not much of a thing of just like it's been focused on selling packs,
yeah,
selling packs, and it does weave to that weird stuff. But also, I don't think people realize. I think if you're in the top, if you're like rank 5, you're in the top like 2% of players or some shit. It's ridiculous. Like it's crazy if like the vast majority of the population that plays and players, like you just have to get into like the top like rank like 10, and you're like in the top like 10% of all players. Which is weird to think about, but
yeah,
that's just how it is. But no, it's been a weird. It hasn't gone over the years. Like I said, they've redone it. They've killed a lot of the esports scene, as we've mentioned before. The dream hacks and everything else, they're not around anymore. I think they might be coming back, but as of right now, they're not. They basically moved to a Grand Masters, where basically like they pick 16 players, and it's been career killers for a lot of people. If you don't make it in there, or if you get relegated out of it, like I've seen, there's been at least 3 like basically world champs who basically just retired once they got knocked out. Because it's just so intense to get in there and it's so limiting, and there's only like 3 events a year now versus like the 100 they used to be, and part of that might be some of the popularity, but also part of it just Blizzard going, no, we're not going to invest in any of this stuff.
yeah,
And it's been hard to watch, but it is a very popular game. Like if you watch on Twitch, still people play
yeah.
watching thousands of people every
Yeah,
day.
and I mean now they might not be playing constructed. At least I know from like the Hearthstone, like the couple of Hearthstone streamers that I watch. I know a lot of them had transitioned over to the Hearthstone Battleground, which is
Yes.
the auto chess or auto battle or whatever you want to call it version of Hearthstone. So Basically, basically, if you know anything about like Dota Auto Chess or League of Legends Team Fight Tactics, kind of like that, where you kind of build the game against other people throughout the match. And I don't again don't watch a lot of Hearthstone streamers, but the ones that I do watch have definitely transitioned away from constructed into playing the ranked season for battlegrounds. I don't know if it's just because like the RNG is less, maybe. I'm not really sure like why
So
that is, but
I know for me, it's funny because all the professionals that I watch, when the season's in play, they play constructed, they do that, and then once the season ends, they all go play BGs. I and so it is funny, like you said that. I personally don't watch constructed like you do anymore. As much as I watch Hearthstone all day, I watch BG Hearthstone pretty much 10 times more than I watch any of the regular Hearthstone, and it's a lot more entertaining to watch, to be honest. I think just people are intrigued. I know for watching it, people love watching it because it is just way, as Kate mentioned, just the general premise of Hearthstone. It is so easy to figure out what they're doing.
yeah.
Versus, I've tried watching Team Tactics. It's super slow. It's super convoluted. You have to know what you're doing, and it's just boring as shit.
I
And you're
still
lost.
don't really know what happens in Battlegrounds, but I'm not gonna lie, it's because I don't pay that much attention.
Yeah, I mean, I personally like Teamfight Tactics, but they just switch up their meta so much that it's just like too much to keep track of
Well,
personally.
that's been a problem we
But
have with
I do
Battleground.
like it. But Battlegrounds is fun, and I think the way that they kind of like do their meta a little bit slower because while I don't play constructed anymore, I do play a lot of the battlegrounds, and I enjoy like that meta kind of like switching up more than really anything as they're adding in like new heroes to choose from like
Yeah.
while you're playing the thing. I think that keeps the game much more fresh than watching two druids, you know.
It's Demon Hunter. Get it right, sir. I'm not gonna lie. Since they added Demon Hunter, Constructed has sucked because they've dominated for
Well,
so
that's what I'm
long.
saying. I stopped watching because of the dual druid matchups that would take forever. Or like when they would have like the bomb warrior, where I gotta watch like bombs
I
go
hate
off
Warrior.
for
Warriors
like
suck.
17 hours of like the stream. But in Battlegrounds, it's a little bit more fast paced and again, like you said, easier to learn than like something like Teamfight Tactics, which I do enjoy, but it's just easier. Like at the end of the day, when I'm in bed and I'm watching something, but I still want to play a game, I can just pull up Battlegrounds on my phone and it's really easy to use. You just drag and drop. Very, very easy, which is not the same for some of the other mobile auto chess battlers, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I definitely. I said I watch it a lot more than I do Constructed. I will say at the end of the day, like there's been a lot of stuff that sucked, like Warrior stuff, but ever since they've added Demon Hunter, I can barely watch Constructed because they've just dominated and they've been trying to balance it forever, and it's just not there.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and then
all
they have,
that. I mean, just really like all that to say that because we're kind of getting over on time now.
yeah.
This the big thing here for the Hearthstone Battleground is that this is just like another example of Blizzard kind of like seeing something, seeing, and then just trying something and seeing if it works, and it being a smash hit because things like Arena and things like that aren't nearly as popular as when Battleground launched, and it's only been about a year since, or well, I guess not 2 years now since it's been out, and it was like a smash
So,
hit. So
to be official, Battlegrounds is still in early access.
I know, yeah, it's still currently in early
But
access, but
well, that's what I'm saying. It's been like going on 2 years now, and
yeah.
it's like technically it's still in early access, but it's been out for 2 years.
I
We don't know if
just
that
look,
game's ever
man,
going to be quote unquote officially
Matt, you
out.
were a StarCraft player, Matt. How long was StarCraft 2 in beta?
It didn't
While
exist.
they had like full out competitions with the game.
Uh,
And the public couldn't play it, but all the pros were like still doing tournaments with StarCraft 2 before the game was even out. Yeah, so to kind of wrap us up, despite like all the things that we've talked about at the top of the show, Blizzard really does stand, at least to me, as one of the companies that can really make games across genres that work very well. So we've seen this so much so that companies like Riot are expanding their own games outside the most popular franchises. So Riot's came out with Valorant, their FPS, Legends of Runeterra, their CCG, Teamfight Tactics, their auto chess, Rune King, their RPG, and they have the fighting game, the dungeon crawler, and the MMO coming out. We've even talked about Valve in our Half Life episode, and they've given a lot as well. But I mean, they have to base a lot of their success for Dota 2 off of Blizzard itself because it came from that port of that mod from Warcraft, and they even precede Valve as a company for about 5 years. So their just ability to kind of give us games across genres that work and continually update those games and just don't let them like stay stagnant. Because I will say that for a lot of these games, they are very kind of open to like the feedback and they implement the changes and they kind of make the game fun. So you're not kind of just playing the same game for a long period of time. Whether it could be good or bad, if it kind of messes up your meta and you don't like certain things, that's one thing. But we've talked about a lot of games here, and they're all different, but they all come from that same company, and they all are pretty good. We kind of already talked about all my fun facts already. I think the one I really want to talk about is like how Blizzard co-developed the Justice League game in '95 for the NES, Genesis, and Condor. I thought that was hilarious.
I'm still blown away by that because I never would have put that out there.
And then I guess like Blizzard's name. We talked about at the start of the show that they were founded as Silicon and Synapses. They went from Silicon to Synapses to Chaos Studios, to Ogre Studios, and then back to Blizzard. And this is mainly just because like each company that bought them didn't like the name that they had picked before.
Oh my god.
And people were getting mixed up when they did Silicon and Synapses. People were getting confused with the meaning of Silicon as like the chemical element, and then like, you know, silicone as in like what you put in your character's boobs in video games for the things. Yeah, so that's really all I got. Final thoughts, Matt?
I have a fun story about silicone, but that'll be for another episode.
Is it about Silicon Labs?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
The place downtown.
But no, my final thoughts is Blizzard's interesting to me because obviously it's been around and it was a big part of my life, especially my early, like, you know, that late 90s, early 2000s, even almost in a thing. And then basically I got to college and then dropped everything I did from Blizzard and just kind of moved away. And while it's weird because Hearthstone is still a huge part of what I do every day. Like I said, I wait basically at 10 o'clock every night, 9 o'clock, I have the exact streamer on. You know, I watch everything. I watch so much Hearthstone involved. But as far as like playing their games, I just don't really play anymore. And there's probably a variety of reasons why, but it is just one of those, like, it's crazy because they make good stuff, and I don't blame people who do play it. And I know why people play it because I obviously played them, but it's just been wild from my personal self of just like how much I've gone from playing them to I don't play at all, but I still always have Blizzard around me.
Yeah, for sure. And Kate?
I miss not WoW. I miss Overwatch. I really want to play Overwatch again. I really loved Overwatch, like a whole bunch. But I think overall, like I said, like one of the things that's really big for me is that I haven't played nearly as much Blizzard as y'all, and even if I've touched some of the games, I haven't put as many hours into them as y'all have. But I've never felt out of touch with Blizzard. Like I feel like I've at least understood the games that have come out, what they do, like all that stuff, which I can't say for my other gaming blind spots. And I think that that's actually really key to showing how big Blizzard is and how impactful Blizzard is, at least when you look at like the different spheres of like what you play and everything like that. Obviously, they're a problematic fave, but I do really, really, I mean, I just want to go play Overwatch now. I haven't played Overwatch since before they added Baptiste, and that's a long ass time. So
Yeah, it's quite a while. I'm kind of in the same boat in terms of like wanting to play Overwatch again, but Overwatch 2 is coming out and it's gonna be really good.
didn't it
Man.
get delayed?
We have no idea when that's coming out, if it's ever coming out.
It's coming out for sure. I mean, the game was like, oh,
Sure.
it's coming out.
Sure.
But, you know, might be a Starcraft 2 situation. Who knows?
It might be, yeah. I'm not saying. I think at the earliest you're looking 2023 at this point.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Yeah, I think problematic fave is like a definitely good way to kind of encapsulate my feelings on Blizzard, and kind of like this episode in general. They do have done a lot of bad stuff, but I think a lot of I don't want to say all of it, but a lot of that is because Activision is just not great. But this is a Blizzard episode, not an Activision episode. But the games are great. I enjoy playing them. If you play any of these games and you're looking for people to play with, let me know. If you want to play Overwatch, let me know as well. I'll re-download it, and then Kate can play Diva, Matt can play Moira, and I'll just play whatever.
I'm not playing with you all.
Matt,
I'll play Moira.
I need my healer.
Yeah, so that's all I got. I know this episode ran a little bit long, but we love you. And 169.
Nice.
As always, if you like what we do here, head on over to patreon.com/butwhythoughpc and support us on Patreon. And if you would like, follow us on all of our social medias at butwhythoughpc. We're really close to 5,000 Twitter followers. So if you don't follow us yet, just go follow us. It would be dope. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Oh My Mythrandir. And I don't think there's anything I'm currently yelling about, which is Godzilla and Kong's about to come out, so like you're gonna see a lot of that. Adrian.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, and if you want to at me and tell me why Arthas isn't garbage, you can at Superreese93, SUPERRUIZ93. But Arthas is trash.
Matt.
Warlock's still the only class that I'll ever play in WoW, and all the rest of them suck.